Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And this is going to be a quick one because I don't have that much time and I didn't read enough. God is not willing today because I had to carry up 108 kilos of Chilean doom metal vinyl 3 flights of stairs, among other things. And if you want to know what's the difference between Chilean doom metal and Argentinian beef, Chilean doom metal has way more suffering and keeps longer, so it's the better choice to spend your money on. Anyway, apart from that, I just didn't have too much time to read. So I'm still stuck in part 3, which is admittedly like twice the length of part 1 and 2, so we're gonna go all the way up until like chapter 16 or 17. I'm kind of confused here, but I think it's chapter 16, including chapter 16. No spoilers beyond that, and I'll try to keep it quick. So let's do this, I guess. Cheers. Ooh. Oh, and also, thank you for actually pushing me over 600 subscribers. I'm extremely happy about that. Like, really happy. And now let's talk about people dying in the north of Genebakis, because, that's fun, right? And I feel like part 3 is like really, escalating a lot of things. There's like 3 main things that we need to talk about. We need to talk about the overall like plot, whatever happening with the Marines in Silver Lake. We need to talk about Rand and Damask and the Teblor, and we need to talk about the Blood Oil Curse thing. So, where to start? Let's start with the overall Silver Lake thing. So throughout the whole thing, like what I realized today is that like this part of The God is Not Willing, at least, is basically a Western. The plot is very close to what you might call your classic Western. You have those settlers who are kind of problematic and so forth. You have your natives coming at them, and you have your sort of maybe kind of good soldiers trying to protect them. And in this case, now that the whole, like, all the natives are coming at them to actually, secure the retreat and evacuate those people. And this feels like very much like a Western plot to me. But I don't mind, that's cool. Plus, you obviously also get, twists on the whole thing because, yeah. This is Malazan and not your average chauvinist, colonialist Western of the 1960s. But it's still like the whole setup of that, like, outlier town, Silver Lake, being like on the border of the wild. You have the slightly, at least slightly dubious mercenaries with Bulk and his people, who do have some reasons to also hate the state and everything. In this case, the Malazans. And you have the settlers who are very reluctant to leave their like halfway broken downtown, which once again fits really well with what I said yesterday about like the slave town being more like a boom town from the west with like oil or gold or whatever being found, and then those resources being taken away, and you have like all you've left are like the has-beens and the people too poor and too broken to move away, but they don't want to move because it's that thing. Plus you have your old sheriff slash sergeant or whatever with I keep forgetting the female, like she's like the commander of the regulars there, the one that Spindle knows, and I just can't remember her name right now because I'm dumb. Anyway, so that's something that I find like very fascinating, to look at the whole story as like that kind of plot, which then obviously allows us to look at the genre of the Western, which also, as I'm not sure how many of you know it, like when you look at like your classic role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons have taken a lot from the whole idea of the Western, with like the characters going into the wild and basically taming the wild. At least when you look at like the early Dungeons and Dragons, like your Keep on the Borderlands, that kind of places. So we take a lot from that, and we see it like exemplified here in Silver Lake. I mean, it's even called Silver Lake, for fuck's sake. And so, yeah, that kind of gave me like a new perspective on it when I just realized it today at some point. So we deal with like all these aspects, like the soldiers know that there's this invasion coming and they can't leave it out because they can't stop it. There are too few people. They have to flee, and they are now trying to figure out how to get the people out there. The settlers are like even more than reluctant. I mean, they just don't want to leave, understandably, because that's like their home and everything. So we have that conflict of a soldier being someone who's very rarely, I guess, or like, no, let's formulate the other way around. Soldiers oftentimes come into situations where the people they're supposed to protect, the people of their own country, are not 100% behind them, or like even exactly against what they're doing. And the question of whether you still do the right thing if like everyone around you tells you that it's wrong what you're doing or doesn't want you to do the thing that you're doing comes back to that point that soldiers' morality is different. Like being a soldier is different from being anyone else. So yeah, that's something that will be interesting to see in the rest of the book, like how they deal with that. Oh yeah, I just remember I'm like including chapter 17 in this one. I think I started chapter 18 earlier today when that pallet of vinyl boxes showed up at my door. Anyway, so that's the one thing that I wanted to look at here, the how much of this is basically your average Western story, and reading it like a Western, I guess, is a good idea to do. Especially with all the stuff are out there. You have the caribou, you have the bears, you have the wolves, I guess. So there's that. Especially when you look at the past of like the enslaving the Teblor, and some like a character like Tracker Damask is exactly that kind of person, which is a rather neat way to switch over to Damask and the Teblor and Rand and what's going on there. Which, they come up there. They hate Damask for good reasons. Damask is like kind of old now and plagued by his conscience at this point. But we also have Rand, who is, he says that like on and on. It's like Damask is his first like real friend. We're gonna talk about like loyalty and friendship there, because Rand is still extremely naive, and we gotta come back to that again and again. That question of like innocence or naivete being something good or something bad, and I mean, I guess most of us like we read like Rand's character, and I guess like both like there's like basically two impulses that we can have. One of them is like saying, "Oh God, this is stupid, dumb kid," and the other one is like, "I just want to hug him and like be nice to him because he's suffered so much without any of it being his fault." And but the question there is that how we should think and deal with something like innocence, naivete? Is there an actual like rational or morally correct way to deal with that, and introduce a naive and innocent person in a proper way into like the complexities and the nasty sides of life, because otherwise you'll just see that innocence crushed down and again and again and again. Is there a way to actually do it without crushing the innocence? I guess that's sort of like the thing that we all figure out when we actually those of us who actually have kids, unlike me. Those of you who have kids probably struggle with that problem on your own. Like, it's like the general thing of like having a child to care for, to see where that's going, right? Anyway, we come to the Teblor, and that's where things get interesting. Because Damask obviously has nothing good coming from the Teblor, and there is justice in that. as he himself acknowledges, and I appreciate that. It still kind of sucks, but I don't believe in capital punishment. But this is Malazan. This is not like communist Europe or whatever we call it these days. Socialist, I guess, socialist Europe. Anyway, this is not that. The other thing, though, is that Rand doesn't believe in it either, and Rand goes and is very much, which is maybe part of his naivete or innocence in a way. He's a moral absolutist, right? And I guess that's sort of where the crux of the matter lies with Rand, is that point where we need to figure out that moral absolutism doesn't help us, right? It doesn't work that way. There, like, while there are strict, a lot of most cases, it's very clear whether things are good or bad, or like right or wrong. There's that vast panoply in between where you realize that morality is a complex thing. It's not just cut and dry, black and white. We're not all for a sale, after all, which is probably good. Although the double hinged like bones might be a cool thing to have. Anyway. Not my point. So that's sort of where we see that situation where Rand is like, he can try to protect Damask, and that will like lead everyone around him into death, because once they figure out that he is the son of Karsa Orlong, his sisters like actually swear to him and loyalty to him, and he has saved those two Jack, those brothers, which is pretty cool. They become much more fun at this point. But he starts to learn that responsibility is, and that this is like something that I feel that I personally struggle with a lot. It's like, I'd like to be a moral absolutist. It would be so much better, but the fact of the matter is that once you have responsibilities for other people, you're forced to make compromise. That's just how the world works, and that hurts. And I think that's one big thing that I love about the Rand storyline, is like, we know, like all of us, we get taught that like making compromises to get like the maximum out of something is the correct way to live. And I believe in that. Civilization is all about compromise. Democracy is all about compromise, which is why the one in the US is so fucked at this point. But not where I wanted to go here. But the point is, like, compromise is what we need to do if we want to live together with other people. That's just how it works. The problem, however, is, and we often overlook that because we get taught so early on, we all believe that compromise is the right way to deal with conflict. We so often forget that compromising hurts on an emotional level if you have like a strong sense of wrong or right, because sometimes you're like, or good or bad, sometimes you're just like, I need to move away, I need to give up positions for a compromise. That's like the definition of compromise, right? You both sides give up some positions, and then you meet in the middle, and then it works out from there. But I guess we've like kind of gotten to acknowledge how much suffering that can be for the person trying to make that compromise. And with Rand being so emotionally open because he is so innocent and so naive in a way, drives that fact home. I really appreciate that aspect. The other thing that we see there is, and this is going to be interesting for the rest of the book, is the idea of how Teblor society is still. We see that with not Damas. Oh God, I'm so bad with names. One of his half sisters, the one that was away with Karsana studying in, like the intellectual one, intellectual Teblors. Would you believe it? Anyway, that one, she's kind of realizing as well, like how current Teblor society, even though you have that unification of all those tribes, all those different people, to flee that great flood that is coming. Even though you have that, you still Tableau society is still built as a warrior society on like loyalty and pride and saving face and that kind of shit. And those of us who have read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, especially Dust of Dreams, know that it's not exactly the smartest thing, not the most adaptable model of society in a way. And we see the same with Jack, obviously, and probably with other parts as well. But yeah, so we see that at work there, and we have that war leader there. So here's a prediction. So if this, I'm obviously not finished, if this were a average like fantasy novel, which I don't believe it is, obviously what will happen is that at some point Rand has to face that war leader, that Arathid war leader whose name I've already forgotten, Tharos something, and he'll actually beat him, and then he'll take over, and then things will be good. So that's what would happen if this were an average fantasy novel. So let's see where this is actually going, because I don't believe that's the way it's going. It would be too cheesy in a way. But when we see that person there as well, that war leader, and he has like legitimate reasons to hate the Malazans, to look down on the Southlanders, but that idea of like arrogance that comes, that idea of arrogance and superiority, that is basically built in to a like warrior society, right? That's one thing we, I guess, oftentimes forget, because most of us don't live in warrior societies, luckily enough, is that like the one like social metric there is pride. And pride is so close to arrogance, so it's like very easy to underestimate your opponents, to underestimate everyone around you, especially if they come from outside your own society. You're like, yeah, they're nothing like us. Especially with someone like the Tableau, who are like basic fucking giants, and then they meet the Malazans, but they have like munitions, technology, tons of magic, all that jazz. Although the magic might just not work that well with the Tableau because of the blood oil thing. But anyway, that's something that we see there. And the blood oil thing is kind of where I wanted to go for the third part of this before I end it. And that is what they do to Salis, that is Rand's mother. That, under the blood oil curse. And this, I feel, is like super important, and we see it with Stillwater, who is like one of the weirdest and most fascinating characters in a while, because of her living in that weird place. And but still, she kind of gets the whole point of why Bengar wants to help Sarlis and take away that blood oil curse, because that's important for like what I said like yesterday. The idea is that the Malazan Marines, the army, even though they occupy, they make things better. It's like, we've seen that in the Malazan Book of the Fall all the time. It's like they dig wells, they like fortify places, they make sure that people have better living conditions, because that helps. And if you can help with magic to save a person from a terrible curse in a way, because even though it's not technically a curse, but still, like, she's been afflicted by a brutal condition in a way, then you do that. And then we get to see the whole magic thing. We get to see that Annex, whatever her second name is also a mage, which is something of a hint for things to come, I suspect. Like, almost everyone in those Marines seems to be a mage at this point. But we have all of that. They accidentally summon the ghost, or like whatever, of Anomander Rake. So there's that. And they save Sarlis, and they manage to make the whole like connection, the blood oil connection between Karsa, Orlong, Sarlis, and Rand into a two-way like connection between Karsa and Rand. And we see that, I guess, in the point where Rand, wakes up with that punch to his head, basically, which he kind of feels that I suspect is exactly what it, what I said is like it's exactly the whole cursor that moment where that blood oil thing was changed, and it will make Rand even more powerful, and he's already fucking powerful to begin with, right? So we'll see where that all is going in the future. So where does that leave us? Marines doing Marine things. The savages, or like at least the natives, all kinds of tribes fleeing natural catastrophe or climate change, as we call it in our world, are going to overrun Silver Lake, and the settlers will be pushed back. I expect battles for the rest of it. I expect a lot of action and crazy shit going on. And I'll try to tell you all about it tomorrow, hopefully. Until then, cheers.